June 21st, Sherwood Drive south to Interstate 81. We are back in Pennsylvania after 3 months of being off the trail. It had rained for 18 days in the month of June in Connecticut, and we were driving out of it on our way here. It was so nice to be back here and out of the rain. We reached Interstate 81 and drove to Sherwood Road. We parked in the parking area and saw a lot of local youths hanging around at the start of the trail. The trail went along the Connedoganet Creek. The creek was high and the trail was flat and muddy. It was not normal mud like we have in Connecticut. It was like clay, stick, and slippery, but not deep. The trail had passed through Scotts Farm Trail Working Center. It was an ATC center with a picturesque old barn with a picnic table, a payphone, and water for hikers. The local kids that we had seen had come up toward us, and I asked them when they got out for the summer. They told me that they had got out 3 weeks ago. They really get out early down here. We continued over a bridge on a road across the creek, and then we were walking on the trail between the road and the creek. Dave had thought that the trail was so muddy because the creek had overflowed onto the trail, which could have happened. The day was sunny, windy, and a little humid with no wind. We had seen tons of wildflower out here. There's so many different kinds here that I could not write them down. They would filled up this page. The trail entered into a large field with a beautiful farm and some cows. We had to go over 3 stiles, and it was very pretty here. The sun was getting hotter as it beat down on us with no shade and no wind. We crossed Bernheisel Road and went into another farm field that walked along the road that ended up going back onto the same road. The trail walks this road over Interstate 81. We turned around here and headed back to the car. We had seen about 15 through hikers heading north on the trail. Many of them had asked the name of the river. On the map, it is called Connedoganet Creek. The local people call it the Crick. We are not sure what the difference is between a creek and a river. One of the hikers had thought that it was the Skahanna River. However, Connedoganet Creek is a 104-mile-long tributary of the Susquehanna River in south-central Pennsylvania. The name is Native American and means a long way with many bends. We stopped in a clump of pine trees and ate our snack. A group of youths was swimming in the river and smoking under the Bernheisel Bridge on the trail. We had seen a goose in the river near the farm, and we had heard some songbirds and some catbirds. We say some dices, wild strawberries, very bitter, blackberries, did not taste good, white swamp azaleas, bull thistles, and some wildflowers that I could not identify. June 22nd, Caledonia State Park north to Stillhouse Hollow Road. We had set up our big tent at Caledonia State Park yesterday and started the trail from the parking lot where we are staying. I saw a turtle in the woods beside the parking lot. The AT goes through the park and the trail goes up from here to Quarry Gap Shelter. The day started out overcast and humid with no wind. The trail started off with a climb from the parking lot to Quarry Hill. It was a hard climb in this humid condition. We reached a beautiful area in the pines and an old fence. It was in an area where there had been an old road to an iron furnace. The trail turned off the dirt road, and we came to a ruin where once stood a building. Only a few cement slabs and a concrete step was left here now. There was no signage for the old furnace here, and the area was beautiful and large with rhododendrons. A sign warned hikers of timber rattlesnakes around here, which are protected. The sun was out with clear blue sky, and a light breeze had picked up. It felt hot, though, with the temperatures in the 80s, and it was still humid. The breeze did help out a little, and there were few bugs out. We reached Quarry Gap Shelter, and it was a magnificent shelter. It was the cleanest shelter that we had ever seen. It had the white chink between the logs, with 2 sleeping areas with a polywood floor. A cover was between the 2 shelters with a picnic table under it. It even had a plant pot hanging outside the shelter. It was the most beautiful shelter we have ever seen on the AT. There were some hikers here taking a break, so we did not stop and continued on the trail. They were brushing their teeth in the spring, so they must have camped here last night. We did not know if they were AT hikers or just a group that were camping here. They should not be brushing their teeth in the drinking water. The trail passed through a rocky area after leaving the shelters. They were the small Pennsylvania type of rocks that you read about in the AT books, and for the most parts of Pennsylvania we had not seen the famous rocks. The trail was now climbing more steeper, and we were getting wiped out from the heat, the humidity, and the climb as the sun was beating down on us. We reached an area with blueberries, and we indulged ourselves with the berries. They were so good. We saw a nice area with some rocks, and Dave said that his mileage watch showed that we were nearing our turnaround mileage, which should be at Stillhouse Hollow Road, that is passable by car. We reached Stillhouse Hollow Road and stopped here to eat our lunch, and then head back to the parking lot and our car. Tomorrow, we will start from this dirt road and continue heading north on the trail. We saw many through hikers on the trail heading north and lots of day hikers on the trail. We stopped and picked some blueberries for our breakfast in the morning, and we reached a nice cool stream that I took off my boots and soaked them in the ice-cold stream. It felt like the mountain streams that we had in New Hampshire. We returned back to the shelter to take some pictures and video of the shelter. It was full of hikers that had their gear spread out everywhere. Some even had their clothing hanging on cloth lines to dry, looked like they were through hikers. It was still early, around 4 o'clock. They must have stopped early so that they could stay in this shelter, because it was really nice. It was a nice hike, and we had done about 6.5 miles. It was sunny and hot, but at least it did not rain. It was a very pretty trail with nicest shelter that we had ever seen. The trail had gone up steeply on the way out, and it was all down on the way back. June 23rd. Stillhouse Hollow Road north to Milesburn Cabin. We drove on the Park Road to where we turned around yesterday on the trail. It was a blue sky day with the temperatures in the 80s and a light breeze. The trail started with a steep descent, which is bad because it will be a steep ascend on our way back when we are tired. We found lots of blueberries on the trail in a nice soft pine area and soft pine needles underfoot with wild azaleas blooming around us. It was fabulous. We had a lot of PUDs over small hills, but the breeze had died down and we were dying on the climbs. The area was mostly pine, the kind that you see in sandy areas. We had crossed many parks roads in Michaud State Park, and they were quite busy here. After about 3 miles, we descended about 500 feet to the Milburn Cabin. It was a PATC cabin that you can rent, so it was locked. We sat on the porch as no one was here right now. It was a beautiful cabin built next to a flowing stream. I soaked my feet in the stream, and it was ice cold. We ate our lunch here and just laid here and enjoyed the peace and quiet. There was a nice breeze, and we were in the shade. We could hear the stream flowing, and we felt relaxed and just wanted to stay here. A through hiker had come by, and he had thought that this was the shelter. We told him that it was not, and that it was still about a couple of more miles on the trail. We were just leaving when he arrived. We had seen several through hikers today, all men. The other days we had seen couples through hikers. We saw some horse poop on the AT and a Walmart bag full of garbage in a fire pit. There were several campsites with fire pits off the side of the trail, and it looked like that it was mostly from the local people than from the through hikers. We stopped at the one with the Walmart bag to take a break. I always bury trash if we cannot take it out, other people's trash, as we always carry our own trash out. As I started down the hill behind the campsite to bury the bag, I had a weird feeling. I remembered about some girls that were shot at, and one was killed somewhere in the Michaud Forest. For some reason, I had a feeling that it was here. I do not know why, but it was a very spooky area, and we quickly packed up and left this area. We met a hiker at the Powerline clearing, and he said that he was section hiking from Maryland to Stratton in Vermont. He told us that he had overstuffed his backpack. He was so excited about hiking this section that he was even taking pictures here. There really was not any good views from here. We had seen some toads and chipmunks, we heard songbirds and a crow, and we saw some azaleas and some rhododendrons. I loved the cabin, but hated the climb in the heat and the humidity. June 24th, Milesburn Cabin north to Shippensburg Road. We drove to Milesburn Road and went back to the cabin. It is a beautiful day with blue skies and little humidity, and the temperatures was in the 80s. I have to say it again, I love this cabin. It is such a beautiful log cabin in the most ideological setting. We left the cabin and crossed a dirt road, and then the trail went into a wonderful pine forest. There were numerous campsites in this area beside the trail. It seems like this section of the AT is full of campsites, not official campsites, that the local people come into these woods and make their own campsites anywhere in the Michoud State Forest. We reached another dirt road, and an AmeriGas propane truck flew by as we were about to cross. It was a forest road, not a town or state road. He should not be driving through her so fast. We crossed the road and entered into an area with mountain laurel blooming. It was so beautiful. Next, we found more blueberries, not as much as yesterday. Some areas have more blueberries than others have. This area has more mountain laurel and rhododendrons. This area is also full of thru hikers right now, and we have already seen several today. Thru hikers must be up to this area already from Georgia. Today, all the thru hikers were men. We saw some kind of animal poop on the trail. It was medium size, and it had blueberries and grass in it. Dave said that it was probably from a raccoon. We did not really know what kind of poop it was, but it did seem too small to be from a bear. Later down the trail, we found a pair of men's boxer shorts and a long-sleeve t-shirt in some brush beside the trail. We reached Birch Run Shelter, and it was in a beautiful area. However, there was a couple of backpackers at the shelter, and they were packing up to leave. Looked like they had stayed the night here. One was the section hiker we met yesterday, who had said that he was overloaded. We kept hiking towards Shippensburg Road. We reached Shippensburg Road, which is a busy paved road, and had a large parking area for the AT. The area was nice in the pines, and we turned around and headed back. We met two section hiker, a man and a woman with a dog that was in the lead. They smelled clean and had new hiking clothing on, so it did not look like they had been on the trail very long. We wanted to stop at the shelter on the way back. 4 hikers were still there, and the 2 with the dog was there. So we passed it again, and we stopped at a campsite further down the trail to eat our lunch in peace. We made it back to the car early and went back to the Milesburn cabin and relaxed here for about 2 hours. Dave had a Dell Pocket PC, and we played chess on it. What can I say? I love this cabin. The mosquitoes were back out and getting bad here, and the 2 hikers with the dog showed up and went down to the stream. They a little loud, and it was no longer peaceful here, so we packed up and headed back to the car. It was about 4 o'clock now. June 25th, Shippensburg Road north to our turnaround point near Woodcrow Road. We started out early today around 9:30, early for us anyways. The day was going to be a hot one. Temperatures are going to be in the upper 90s with high humidity and dead air, no wind today. We drove to Shippensburg Road and we were already sweating before we even stepped onto the trail. The trail went into the woods through a grassy area with some pine trees. It was a beautiful area with some mountain laurels blooming and the most that we had seen on this trip so far. We had met a southbound couple backpacking the AT. They were section hikers, and they were very nice. Their trail names were Gage and Shadow, and they had done the southern section of the AT. They told us that they had done some section of the AT in New England, the Massachusetts and the Vermont sections. They said that they had planned on doing a section of the trail in Connecticut this week, but when they heard the weather in Connecticut and of the 18 of days of rain, of the 21 days in June in Connecticut, that the trail near the Housatonic River was flooded, and this was the section that they planned to do. So their plans had changed, and that is why they are here doing this section of the AT instead. Their new plan is to backpack to New Hampshire and to make it through New Hampshire by the end of August. We might be seeing them again in August, where we are also planning to be on the AT. We were having more problems with the bugs today, the mosquitoes, gnats, and no ums. They were sticking to our sweaty skin and driving Dave nuts. We crossed another road and then a trail to Missioner Cabin, another PATC cabin that you could rent. We were humming it on the trail to another road crossing with signs for the Tumbling Run Game Preserve property. This section goes through the preserve forward. We wanted to make at least 3 miles on this section, so Dave was clocking the mileage on his watch. So when we did the 3 miles, Dave made a cairn, and I set up a pile of down trees like a small teepee to mark our turnaround point for tomorrow's hike. We did not eat our lunch here because I wanted to try to go off the trail and down the Dead Women Hollow Trail to the McCainer cabin and eat here if no one was staying at it. We reached the trail and descended a wide path. Near the bottom, we could hear the sounds of children, so we pretty much knew that someone was at the cabin. I took a picture of the cabin. It was a nice log cabin, but there were people all over the place around the cabin. We followed the Dead Women Hollow Trail. It was horrible, muddy and brushy, and the bugs here were worse than they were on the AT, or maybe because of the time of the day. The family we heard on our way down was on the trail in front of us. A woman was throwing mud out of a mud pit and told us that she was fixing it. The children were on the footbridge and would not move when we tried to cross it. Dave went into the stream and tried to get across on the rocks. His foot slipped off of one of the rocks and into the water. I felt bad as I wanted to hike the trail to the cabin and wanted to explore a new trail. I love to explore trails. We came to a logging area where it was all stripped of trees. All the vegetation around here was gone. The equipment was roaring down the logging roads as we continued to head back to the AT, and the sun was baking us alive with no protection from the treeless logging area. You can picture this in your mind. Imagine yourself being in the desert on a hot, sunny day. Yeah, it was that bad out here. It was murder. We had not stopped for lunch, and we were now pushing the 6-mile mark. We reached the AT and met some more backpackers, again mostly men. When we were almost to the car, we met a group of day hikers, a pregnant woman, an older man, a younger man, and a dog heading toward us on the trail. The younger guy said that there was a big, and he held both his hand out at arm length to show us how big it was, and said 5-feet-long rattlesnake in the middle of the trail ahead of us. The dog never barked, and the 2 other hikers had looked at him with a look of surprise. We said, "Okay, thank you," and continued on the trail. Well, we never seen any snakes on the trail, and we were only about 500 feet from the car. So either it moved of the trail before we reached it, or it was never there, and he was just joking around with us. We reached the car, and it was 115 degrees inside the car. We had to leave the doors open to let the heat out before we got inside. I told you that it really hot out. When we reached the town on the ride back to our campsite, we saw a local outside building temperature sign that read 94 degrees. June 26th, Michaud Road south to our turnaround point near Wood Crow Road. Today we will be connecting a piece that we did in April. This will complete a section of one of the maps for Pennsylvania, and so we would have completed 2 of the AT Pennsylvania maps. The weather was hot with the temperatures in the upper 80s and the air was humid. The bugs are now at full bloom. Mosquitoes, gnats, black flies, and the nasty no-see-ums. The trail started off in the hardwoods, with a lot of invasive barberries and some ferns. It was an old dirt road that was now all grown in with a grassy path. It seemed to be in a lower area than the other days because there were no pines, and it was kind of in a swamp with lots of mud. We reached the Tom Run shelter. It was not as nice as the Quarry Gap shelter or even the Birch Run shelter, and it was smaller than the other 2. There was 2 small lean-to that spread apart from each other, each with a picnic table. The campsite area was wet and buggy. I guess we were expecting for it to be like the other 2 shelters. It was clean and looked new and better than the shelters in New Jersey for sure. We wrote in this logbook, but the other shelters on this trip was too crowded, so we could not log into them. We continued on the trail up a long hill. The logbook mentioned that hikers have been seeing a rattlesnake on the hill since June, and that it was a large snake. Well, we did not see any snakes here, just a long climb under a hot sun. A group of through hikers passed when we first got on the trail. They had asked us where the halfway sign was. Their hiking book showed that it should be near the trail somewhere in this area. I told them that it was after the building where they did the ice cream challenge. They told us that they were going to celebrate at the halfway sign. After we climbed to the top of the hill, we passed another large youth group that were camping off the side of the trail, and then several northbounders passed us. We crossed Wood Crow Road, a difficult road to cross in the hot sun. We climbed up the trail briefly with a new drainage ditch near the trail and made it to our turnaround point. The rock cairn and my stick teepee was still here. We had done 2.9 miles to this point. On our way back out, we had ate our lunch where the youth group had camped. They left egg cartons, noodle shells, and hamburger patties on the ground. The patties were already covered with ants and the fire pit was full of soda cans. It would be nice if the youth leaders would review trail ethics and the lead no trace practices. We stopped at a stream, and I soaked my hot, aching feet in the nice cold stream. Dave soaked his bandana and used it to cool off his head, so I took off my shirt and soaked it in the water. It was a good thing no hiker passed by, but it felt really good when I put it back on. The car was hot again, and we left covered in sweat and feeling stinky and sticky. We saw a toad and heard some songbirds. We saw some mountain laurel and blueberries near the road where we were parked. June 27th, Caledonia State Park, south to Rocky Mountain Shelter. This is our last day of our hiking trip. Last night we had some rain, and this morning the sun is out with a breeze, and the temperature is around 88 degrees, which was nicer than the last 2 days with no breeze. However, the whole week here was nice. At least it did not rain every day during our trip. The AT walks through the park and the picnic area. The rhododendrons was beautiful in the pines, and there was a wedding being set up here, right next to the AT. Maybe there are 2 through hikers getting married on the trail, which would be nice. We have read books where hikers meet on the trail and get married when they are still hiking the trail or after they finish the trail. The trail crossed busy Route 30, very difficult with 3 lanes of heavy traffic. The trail climbed in the pine forest. This area reminds me of an area in New Hampshire, as it quickly went into a hardwood forest. We saw a few really large trees when we left the park, like old-growth trees that are large trees that are part of an old-growth forest. It was a tough climb to a rocky outcropping. Now we are in the Pennsylvania rocks that I had heard so much about. This area had lots of interesting rock formations. We had seen a lot of through hikers today, and the weather was great now. I was starting to get depressed that it would be our last day of hiking for a long time. The trail to the shelter was a steep descent for about 0.3 miles to Rocky Mountain Shelters. The shelter was a log lean-to style shelter, which once again were 2 small lean-to that were spread apart from each other. We had the shelter to ourselves. Most likely the through hikers passed this one because of the descent down and the climb back up. It was in a very nice area with a breeze, however there was no view here. We stayed here for a while and I read the logbook. It mentioned a large hairy spider under the toilet seat in the privy. One person wrote that they got bit by it while sitting on the toilet seat. I checked the privy and found big hairy spider. We ate our lunch here and left a bag of cheddar-style soy chips for the through hikers. We normally do not leave food behind because of bears or other critters, but we had seen a lot of them on the trail this week, so I am sure that one of them would enjoy it. I was not sure if there are any bears in this area, as we had seen no sign of them or even signs warning of bears, like they have in New Jersey. We saw a deer on the way back as we were climbing back up on the trail from the shelters. When we got back to the campground, the wedding was over. Even the chairs were gone, and no wedding party anywhere in sight. There were a large birthday parties and reunions in the pavilions here, but no wedding party, and it was a Saturday. I could imagine through hikers smelling barbecues in the campground as they are walking through the campground. I have read a few campers will offer through hiker food when they walk through the campground on the trail. It is also shocking for hikers to come out of the peace and quiet of the woods into a noisy campground. Even if you have not been hiking for days, and only after 6 hours in the woods, and you smell food that you have not had for a long time. I could really go for some barbecue chicken right now.